Hello and welcome to Mythic Mind Games, where we discuss video games through the lens of the Christian humanities. I'm Dr. Andrew Snyder, and I'm glad that you're here. All right, welcome back to our short series on Mass Effect as we get into Mass Effect 2. Today we're going to just continue going through the same kind of routine we've been doing, where we'll just go around and talk about whatever general thoughts you want to throw out there to get us started. We'll follow those wherever it leads. I think I'll start this time. So I just I'm about 2/3 away through my second replay of this game. I was hoping to finish it before this conversation, but there's other stuff to do. But in my estimation, this is probably the least philosophically heavy of the three. Maybe some of you will disagree with me on that, but I feel pretty solid in that take. Where I feel like the first one really sets up, obviously, the lore. It sets up these themes of fate and destiny and AI and the major elements of the series. And then I feel like in the third game, we're going to get into that on a deeper level. In the second game, I feel like it's a lot of breadth, but not quite as much depth. And so I feel like it's probably the most entertaining for me. I like the large cast of characters and all that entails. But as far as the actual main plot of the story, it's pretty thin. And so that's sort of my initial thoughts here. It's fun, a lot of breadth. I feel like it's not quite as heavy on an intellectual level, which isn't necessarily an insult for a video game. But I'd be interested to see what some of you think about that. I'll just go around to have you here. Michael, you want to lead off with some thoughts about this game?
I mean that's basically exactly correct. A Mass Effect 2 is the dirty dozen in sci-fi, right? It's you get together a group of complete misfits. Most of them probably have a criminal record somewhere, right? But they're all specialists. You convince them all to do their job. You deal with their personal demons along the way, and then send them on the suicide mission. You're right. It's a simpler game, but I think the breadth of the characters really stands out, and I think that's a reason why a lot of people list Mass Effect 2 as their favorite. Is there's just it has a really colorful cast of characters that are just really entertaining to spend time around. Some excellent voice acting too. Some characters like Thane, who you just hear that slightly processed gravelly voice, and anytime you start talking about them, there's some good characters here.
Yeah, as I'm doing this round with a more of a pluralistic kind of mentality, spreading out to the aliens, and the second game in particular, I think I don't know, it requires a lot of playthroughs to character engagements. So yeah, I think that's a fair analysis. All right, Megan, tell us some thoughts about this game.
Sure, I know it has often been said, maybe even by me, that it's the best of the trilogy. I think narratively, it has great pacing, the tightest storyline, satisfying ending, depending, I guess, on how you play your cards throughout the game. But it doesn't suffer from the conclusive catastrophe that Mass Effect 3 does. So I understand why people like it so much. It is very fun, and I'm trying to think if I would say it lacks depth, or maybe relative to the other three. I see why you say it. I do think that putting your protagonist in the position of now working for a terrorist, humanity first organization does play a similar move that KOTOR 2 does, which is call into question, okay, you're working for this previous group, but how tight are their ethics? Is this a valid secondary approach? Are these, the other good guys and they just have a different view, or are they actually just, racist terrorists? I think there are some valuable questions that the game asks. I appreciate the varied personalities of the characters, and I appreciate especially that BioWare at this time didn't compel you to like every single person. I played through Veilguard when it came out, just about after it came out this past, October, November. And that was a game from BioWare that was suffering from, these are your friends and you're all just one big family. No, these people, you are invited to dislike them because they have very different personalities. So I understand why there's the comment of maybe it lacks depth relative to the other two, but there's some interesting narrative stuff happening in the second game that I really appreciate.
Yeah, you definitely deal with the ideology versus pragmatism of, is it okay to work with bad people for good ends? Um, and I mean, to be fair, I think that within the game, at least more or less up to the end, I mean, obviously, the elusive man isn't necessarily a great guy, but you have reason to think that maybe Cerberus as an organization isn't entirely evil. Like there are many decent people who are working for Cerberus that you engage with. And so, I mean, I think that there's room within this game at least to justify, working with this guy if this is what it's going to take to save the galaxy. And
Hmm.
yeah, I don't know, maybe we can follow up on what we think about that on on our own stage. I mean, we don't need to get like hyper political, but I mean, just that basic question of, is it okay to form those kinds of alliances with people that you don't necessarily endorse in order to accomplish some mutual aim together? I think it's a question that's worth asking on a very practical level. All right, David, tell us something about this game.
Yeah, I really liked Michael's Dirty Dozen analogy. That's pretty good. And but there are some really interesting characters on the team, like Thane that we mentioned, and Legion and Grunt and even Jack to a certain degree. Even though it's a little stereotypical, little hot topic employee about her, but there's some depth if you actually pursue your relationships and the missions that you go on with the individual people, their loyalty missions. But yeah, on a just a surface level, I liked the improvements to the combat. The you, Andrew, didn't really experience just how weak the combat was in Mass Effect 1 at launch. The Legacy Edition fixed a lot of that. But the addition of these clips that are basically disposable heat sinks as an excuse to make guns suddenly have ammo and better cover fighting and things like that, I thought were interesting. And it is more mission based, and you literally have been brought back to life by this person who you normally would not have aligned yourself with, which adds interesting tension and options for you during the game. So yeah, I everybody always says it's their favorite. I guess I'm not really the kind. I like to take the three as a whole. It was always meant to be a trilogy, so I really see them all as one for the most part. But yeah, it is a really good, solid game and pretty straightforward in how to work your way through it. But oh, I didn't even mention Grunt. I think Grunt is a really interesting character study as well. But we can talk more about the characters later.
Yeah, he's a fun character, and I do kind of appreciate when they try to jokingly explain away the differences in how things work, across games. Like just today, I did the Shadow Broker mission again when Liara is doing the hack on the door, and Shepard's like, it wasn't so much easier when we could just slap some Omni gel on here.
Sure.
It's kind of funny the way they try to work that in. All right, Ian, tell us something about this game.
So I just played it for the first time in the last 2 weeks. You guys talked me into trying to play the game so I could do the podcasts. And I had a good time. I did play it completely on casual. I am not interested in achievements or beating the game on insanity. I just wanted to get a flavor for the game and what the ideas and characters were. Um, I still stand by. I enjoy the gameplay ideas of the first game. I don't like ammo. I prefer the overheating mechanic, but I think the execution was much more polished, so I'll give it that. The structure of the game is both extremely satisfying and extremely frustrating. It's extremely satisfying to meet this group of really broken characters. And if you're playing mostly Paragon, I think I got 1 bar of red and then full blue. Because I was rude to the elusive man in every conversation, is why I got 1 bar of red. Um, as a Paragon, you basically help a bunch of people become better people. Like you form a team, and I really enjoyed that. It had a lot of sort of Firefly vibes, and you form a crew that all works together, all different functions and motivations, and all their own missions. And you keep getting interrupted by this incredibly boring zombie monster group that I don't care about. The only motivation that made any sense to me by the end of the mission was revenge, because they blew up my ship at the beginning. They didn't do a good job of making me care that the collectors are killing colonists. And the fact that I'm working for the Elusive Man just makes me really grumpy. And I said this last time, but I say it even more for this game, having played through it. The Elusive Man isn't just evil, he's incredibly incompetent. He stabs me in the back in the middle when I go on the collector vessel for no good reason, and then he wants me to clearly collect dangerous technology for him to use when I already know he stabbed me in the back. So he's just the most incompetent terrorist, and I resent being forced to work for that guy.
Now, to clarify, you don't care when humans die. That's what I heard there.
That is
Right.
correct. I
He
only
needs a
care
better
about
motivation.
Turian and Geth lives.
So you're actually on the side of the collectors. That's the issue.
No, the collectors want to collect the Geth and the Turians too. I'm against the collectors, and they blew up my ship.
But those colonists,
No, the colonists. Why should I care about them? I've never talked to them. I've never had a relationship with them.
This raises some interesting ethical questions here.
yeah,
You're okay with genocide as long as you've never talked to them before.
Correct.
Okay. You might have more in common with the Elusive Man than you once thought.
I'm confident though. I won. 0 casualties.
Fair enough, I guess. Yeah, my first go round, I did not have 0 casualties. I never looked ahead at what leads to what, so I was definitely surprised when I lost some people at the end. So I look forward to seeing some of them in the third game this time around. All right, Kittrick, why don't you tell us something about this game?
Well, I'm curious. Who did you lose?
Well, I know I lost Tally and
Hmm.
a couple others that I
Ooh,
actually can't
that's
remember because I didn't really hang out with them the first
Yeah.
time around, anyways.
Callie is the
Yeah.
best character. How could you lose her?
that would be crushing.
Yeah,
That would have been crushing
I
on a
really did
blind
not see
playthrough.
that coming.
Yeah, that was my first time playing Mass Effect 2, was going through the suicide mission, lost Tally.
Yeah,
And
I was very intentional about making sure that Legion died.
see, for some reason at one point I keep, like, pause, reload. This isn't going to happen again. I'll send Legion in this time. Then Legion died. So, the choices that you actually do get around at that point. Um, I'd say overall for this game, everything was an upgrade. As I said before, I played it on the Xbox, so the entire system was a delight. Except for one thing that I noticed is from the first game to this one is there's not enough. It just felt much more bottlenecked. This is definitely a rail game. This is one where you go mission, 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 and everything seems smaller, even though you're in this whole new place that is the terminus system, and you don't have all the niceties that you would had in the first game because everything else was a little more structured. This is more outlaw based. So I think this one, that was the biggest culture shock to me for this game, was not being able to actually fully see everything. Even when you're looking behind Shepard's back, it seems like Shepard's bigger and everything else just got smaller. So that was a little bit of a downer for me on that. I mean, the romances, the voice acting that they put into it, the voice actors, how many of them are from sci-fi series already? You got 3, Trisha Helfer, Carrie-Anne Moss, and oh, who plays the CO from Battlestar Galactica, who plays Lieutenant Bailey. Anywho's, they're all part of the sci-fi world already, and just bringing those in to make everything just really boosted it, along with the cinematic views. Everything they did inside the game to make it look more like a movie was incredible.
Yeah, I think that it does generally have a more of a movie kind of feel in that, as you said, the scope seems to be a little bit smaller, more of more of a rail line. That there's it's a lot more kind of action based, more fast paced, I would say. Whereas the story, it's a little bit more meandering, a little bit more slow in the first game, which you would expect in the first the beginning of any series. But I feel like even in the third one as well, it's a lot more meandering, a lot more exploration involved. Whereas this is more you're being pushed in these directions. Um, though though I will say there's a lot of meandering for the scanning planets, and that is so boring. uh,
Mining. Yeah.
yes, I mean I'm doing a lot this go around because I want to make sure my ship is in top shape. I've learned that lesson, but it's just a boring little mini game that I was glad to see go when I started the third game.
Yet most people hated exploring these randomly generated planets with the Mako or whatever it was in the first one. And then they replaced it with, yeah, an odd mineral scanning mini game in this one. But I do think that led to it feeling a bit smaller as well, because there were far fewer planets that you actually land on and have anything to do.
Well, even the primary planets, in Mass Effect 1, you get down, you get out, there's a vehicle section, so you see more of the context of the interior locations that you visit.
Hmm.
Simply just creates a bigger feel. And removing the vehicle sequences, by and large, restricts the world to exactly what you were saying, over Shepard's shoulder.
Well, what else do we have to say here?
Well, I'd like to talk about the characters because I think they're the heart of this game. And my favorite has got to be Thane. I think he's such an interesting character because he's this Drell assassin and he has this terminal disease from being rescued by the Hanar and spending too much time on the Hanar homeworld that damaged his lungs. But the fact that he retains their old polytheistic religion and he prays to different deities for different reasons, depending on what he's doing. And you can press him on how do you reconcile your beliefs with, you know, being a gun for hire, basically. And he said, well, in my religion, your body is separate from your soul, and your body is more of a tool, like a weapon that you're utilizing. But then the Drell all have perfect recall of everything that happened in their lives, and so he is haunted by a perfect recollection of everyone whose life he's taken. So he can't really um, faithfully live out the philosophy that he claims to hold. So it makes for an interesting aspect of his character.
Yeah, I agree. I think Thane is definitely one of the most uh, complex of the world building and new characters in the whole setup of your characterization. I kind of wish I like that you get to talk to his son as his loyalty mission, but I feel like it would have been nice if his loyalty mission had involved going back to his home planet and dealing with Hanar Drell relations, so you could actually see that. But I get that would be pretty difficult to. That would be a big break in the gameplay style. But I think that would have really built on a strength they had there. My favorite character was Garrus. I just liked getting to use him again and really digging into that continued friendship between him and Shepard. I like the Turian culture. I watched a couple of videos that said that the Turians are kind of based on Romans slash Japanese empire sort of structure, and I can definitely see that. And as someone who enjoys the more order based and rule following type things, Garrus's attempts to negotiate his culture and his desires was very compelling to me.
You know, I was
Sorry,
gonna
go
say
ahead.
that, yeah, I was just going to say that yours seems to be a general fan favorite. I actually find him kind of boring, personally. I don't know. Maybe I haven't
It's because
entertained him
you're a
enough.
renegade, Andrew.
I mean, I guess that might have something to do with it. Um, I mean, based off what David said about Thane, that's one I would like to explore a little bit more. I just started palling around with him. Haven't done his loyalty mission yet, but he's definitely an interesting character, and I really appreciate when the characters bring in not just different personalities, but that the different kind of root philosophy and religious system. I mean, even based off, what you were just saying about how there's kind of this dissonance between the soul and the body in the way that they pair out their morality. I mean, it makes me think of
The oldest
even
heresy.
yeah, right. Some of the old heresies. I mean, like, there's certain forms of Gnosticism which would not just say the body is evil, but basically the body's unimportant. Therefore, it doesn't matter what you do with it. And so that idea is definitely very much rooted in certain primary world beliefs. And uh, I wonder, like, I would love to talk to some of the BioWare writers about like, who are these people? Like, are these people who have like actually really studied religion and philosophy, or are they pulling out of something secondary? I feel like it'd be really fascinating to speak with one of them. Um, I know that who's that that main guy Drew
Drew
got the
Karpyshyn.
yeah, that's
Christian.
the one. Um, I've been tempted to shoot him a message and see if I can get him on. I know he's done stuff like that before, but I know that'd be a big reach. But well, who knows?
Not that big a reach. He has been pretty interactive with fans.
Yeah. So we'll see. It's something I've entertained at least. Um, all right. What Michael? What were we gonna say before I cut you off?
Oh, I was going to say about Garrus is, I didn't much care for Garrus in the first one. He's just he's the cop that's frustrated by the rules, in the first Mass Effect. And you get to know him more in the second one, and then he's back. He's because he's part of the core group that never leaves. Was it just he and Tally that are across all three games?
Right.
I understand why people really love him by Mass Effect 3, even though he's not one of my personal favorites. But the fact that he's just that constant presence, and he's got that great scene in the third one where they're up on one of the bridges in the Citadel where they're not supposed to be, and they're shooting cans. And I get it. I totally get it. He's not a favorite, but I definitely get it. Um, my favorite for Mass Effect 2 is probably got to be Morden Solus. Not from a gameplay perspective. I don't really think the tech characters are all that interesting, even though they're useful. They're just not interesting from a gameplay perspective to me. But he ties into some of the core aspects of the setting with the Krogan and why did I suddenly forget what species Morden is? Someone help me.
Solarian.
Solarian. There we go. With the way the Solarians created the genophage to wreck the Krogans' reproductivity, and the way that Morden over Mass Effect 2 and then especially 3 deal with the guilt of doing that is makes for a very interesting character, especially because for a while you don't see any kind of guilt. It's almost like a defiance, and then you peel off that scab, and then it's like, yes, this is actually a big deal to him. So I've just really enjoy the way the character ties to a core piece of mythology in the series. And he sings.
Yeah, I do think that
number.
He's definitely somebody who has, I think, more of a character arc than the others in that, in his companion quest in Mass Effect 2, I mean, he's willing to kill his former student who's trying to erase the genophage, whereas then he's going to, come all the way around in third game. All right. Megan, looks like you have something to say.
Yeah, I can't decide. I really enjoyed Jack, and actually, in one of my replays as a male, I romanced her, and I think her arc, fortunately or unfortunately, becomes a little more pronounced and enjoyable if you romance her because you get to see the full vulnerability and softness that she ends up developing over the course of the game. Although I enjoy that you have to refuse to sleep with her in order to get to that point. And so I do think there's a depth there. Some people have said like, oh, you're just curing her by sleeping with her. Like I don't think that's actually how it plays out. It's a funny joke, but it's not real. But Samara, who is not a big fan favorite and not even a favorite of mine, I do think, speaking of these new philosophical systems that we get introduced to. She's a Justicar. She's got this very rigid ethical system that she operates on, this kind of Judge Dredd personality, in job, really. I think that's really interesting. But I'm curious to know what people's least favorite characters are. And you can't say Jacob because that's everybody's least favorite. So somebody besides Jacob.
I was going to take Jacob as a better
As a
character,
favorite?
actually.
Get
Only
real.
for the loyalty.
Be honest.
Defend him. Defend him. I love to hear it.
Okay, the loyalty mission. The loyalty mission is very twisted, and like the first time, it still is haunting to me. Even going back and playing the other ones, but the first time hitting it up and being like, okay, his father's created this harem, and is the only one left, and just playing it off, and he goes there, and you can let him be super upset, and his dad doesn't even know him. It's great. I do really just like the way that whole thing played out, even though it's abhorrent.
Yeah.
Jacob doesn't get a fair shot because Jacob is filling a very important storytelling role, and he fills the same role that James Vega does in Mass Effect 3. And that is the onboarding character for people new to the game starting at that point. There's more explanation that comes about the world and what's going on through Jacob in the early phases of Mass Effect 2. Like you learn more about the world and what's going on from Jacob. It's the same way with James Vega in Mass Effect 3. That they don't really get a fair shot because they have a specific role within the narrative, and it has to do it because it's a video game.
That's a really good point.
I don't know. James Vega has a ton of personality, and Jacob has absolutely none.
Wait. I thought that we couldn't say Jacob.
Well, she was agreeing that he was the least favorite.
I was assuming, yes. I was projecting onto all of you that you were going to say he was the least favorite, and obviously I was speaking ill of him prematurely. But
as a squad member, no, and only early on because of the fire ammo. But other than that,
I really got to say, least favorite is probably Samara for me. I don't know. I just don't find her very.
The loyalty mission, I think, is a little more interesting.
Yeah, maybe it's just because she's kind of annoying to bring along, and she's just. I don't know. But maybe Samara.
No, this is what I'm talking about, though, when I made my first comment, that the game doesn't invite you to love absolutely everybody, and you can actively be annoyed by people. Thane, I think, is very interesting. I had a lot of disagreements with him in all my conversations. Legion, I think, is an abomination. I never liked him even once.
He has a soul, though.
No, that's the third game, maybe conversation. Yes, exactly. That's the problem. No, but I think the character is really interesting. We haven't talked about Miranda. Nobody's
okay, so I was
the obvious love interest of the game for.
Well, I'm a FemShep player, so she wasn't a love interest for me. But my actual least favorite was Zaid, and I know he's DLC, but I regret doing his loyalty mission because I did not want those renegade points for letting all those people burn to death. That was horrible. And he's a really boring character. But he's DLC, so he doesn't really count. Although I will say one of my favorites was actually Kasumi, who's also DLC, and I thought she was really funny. Of the main non-DLC characters, I would say Miranda's probably my least favorite, partly because, and this is very shallow, but I loved Yvonne Strahovski in Chuck, and so seeing her with black hair is too weird. So it was just very strange looking at Sarah, but black hair. Also, her character, I like the sister angle, but I don't feel... I never got involved in her character emotionally. She never really gets that emotional when she talks about her father, her sister, and so I would never want to take her anywhere. I never like to pick her for anything. So she's probably my least favorite of the main characters.
The most interesting thing about Miranda is actually if she was the love interest in the second game, and if you basically choose someone, a different girl in the third game. And there's this scene, my wife on a when she did a male shepherd playthrough one time saw this scene, and there's this really heartbreaking scene where Miranda is like really just crushed by it. And it's very interesting because it's a very well acted humanizing moment, and you can see that she's just heartbroken over it. So after that scene, I liked her a whole lot more. I was like, oh, okay, that works. That helped humanize the I'm so mad because I'm too pretty and too perfect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you. So
And
that's what
I did
I
feel
was
kind of
going to
bad.
say. Yeah. I was going to say she was my least favorite character because she's a video game character that is designed to be attractive to men, and the in-game backstory is that she's genetically designed to be attractive to men, and I just don't find that appealing at all. I mean, Tali is the only romance interest of any value, and that's
That's
all I
because
have to say
Callie
about it.
is so sweet.
Yeah, Tali's the only, I don't know, I feel like she's the most normal. I was going to say human being. She's not a human being, but like the most just normal person without any kind of really weird issues or hangups, I think, in the story to me. And that's probably why I always found her more normal.
She's got too much little sister energy for me for that. But and Garrus has big brother vibes. You got the two that are always with you. You got the sister and the brother vibes. So
Yeah, in my very pro-human first run, I felt kind of bad when Ashley. I feel bad making her cry. But to go off of what Ian said about Zaid, I mean, he very much strikes me as a more shallow version of Canderous. That he's just this kind of, I don't know, very militaristic, mercenary type, but he's just there's nothing really there. But beyond that, I mean, uh, I have to say my least favorite is Legion. I appreciate what they're trying to do, but at the same time, they're trying to give you this friendly Geth while literally like directly quoting scripture. They're saying this is Legion. Like, how is that supposed to be your friend? He is, as Megan said, he's abomination. Like, he is not something that should exist, let
Hmm.
alone be in close proximity to you.
It's just a metaphor because he has like over 1,000, Geth platforms or Geth programs inside his platform, where a normal Geth only has like 100. And so he's like, yeah, that is an acceptable metaphor. I'll take that name. But yeah, it is a demonic reference. I get that. But I've always loved Legion. I find him fascinating. I love how if you press him on why he's taken a piece of your old N7 armor to repair himself, he just says there was a hole. And then if you
There was
press
a
him farther,
whole.
he's like, no, no further data. Like he can't explain it. It's not a logical choice that he made. And I think that makes it a little bit more interesting. But also just from an aesthetic level, I love the design of the Geth and the way that all of his face parts move around when they're talking to him. I think it's pretty cool. But yes, it's AI. AI's bad. I get it. But I think he's a pretty cool character.
No, AI is good. EDU is your friend.
Yeah,
Oh, wait.
oh, go ahead.
No, no, no. Go ahead.
Okay. For Legion, I mean, is he a messiah figure though in this? Is he a one that is trying to, I'm saying he, ugh, sorry, but I'm gonna have to get over that.
Collective pronoun is appropriate in this case.
he uses plural most of the time.
He does use
He
they,
does say
right?
we most of the time. I think there are places where the script screws up and he uses singular, but generally it's plural.
Right. Anyways, is Legion a messiah figure in the way that, I mean, his loyalty mission is about heretics, right? He's trying to bring about a overall change to his Geth, the ones that can actually follow and lead. And one of the reasons he has the N7 armor is because as we talked last time, Shepard is a Christ-like figure in the resurrection part, and then being brought up to the the throne room of the elusive man, which if you look at Revelation 4, Revelation 4:6 and before the throne was something like a sea of glass, like the clearest crystal. That is his throne room. Something, side note, you can also see an Alien Covenant at the very beginning. It's just that is the image of a god. Not only that, another moment with the Elusive Man, you can see a halo in the Omni screen behind him. They shoot him low, and he just has this overall deity to him. So when it comes to Legion being the one that's trying to bring about his own people more than Shepard, but still trying to be Shepard in that way, I would say that, yeah, there's some sort of Messiah complex in him.
Yeah, it's good observations there.
You say Messiah, I say Antichrist.
So, yeah, well, that might be more of a conversation for Mass Effect 3 as well. Yeah. Which is significantly more interesting if Legion is still alive, Andrew. Just for reference. The Geth Quarian storyline is definitely more interesting with Legion.
Although, I mean, some version of him does come back if you kill him off.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the specifics. I don't think I've ever played it like that, but I know I've seen the clips of it. David shaking his head down there.
I just realized that even in my Renegade playthroughs, I've never had Legion die. I hadn't seen what would happen if that occurs. That's interesting.
I killed off everyone in my last playthrough. The speech where he stands up there with two people on his sides and then he's only speaking to two people, really weird.
Have you ever seen there's an ending where everyone dies, including Shepard in Mass Effect 2. You can, if you get everyone killed on the suicide mission, Shepard misses the jump at the end and he's like telling Joker, like, tell them they're coming, whatever. Then Shepard falls to his death. And at the end, instead of Shepard looking out over space, it's like Joker over all of these coffins. And then Joker's looking out like, now it's Joker versus the universe. You said something, Andrew, but I didn't hear it. Did anyone?
Mm-mm.
There we go. So how would that ending import into the third game?
You can't.
Oh,
It's
okay,
over.
okay.
The game ends. Yeah. It cannot be imported. That's definitely one to look up on YouTube and not spend an entire game playing deliberately badly enough to engineer that depressing ending.
So I am curious. There's a lot of very anti-Legion guys here, which saddens me because I think Legion's really cool. But no one's taking my ED bait. Like, why are you so anti-Legion but don't have anything to say about ED?
I'm anti-ED as well, but it's
fair.
more pronounced in the third game.
Yeah, I was about to say I'm not really anti-ED until the third one. You know, okay, again, so what I said on the last podcast is that more often than not, artificial intelligence and sci-fi doesn't when it's asking that question of, oh, can AI be alive? It's not really so much exploring how does that happen? How would, because no one understands the breath of life, right? So that's not really something we can understand. But it's usually
brain.
It's usually more an exploration of human characteristics and what is it to be human. And so that's what the Edie's story is looking at some of those aspects of humanity. And you're right, it's just a lot more pronounced in 3 than it is 2. So say what you got about Edie in 2, Ian? What do you got, since it's fresh for you?
I come at it from if it's truly AI and it's not just an LLM. Now, an LLM, I think, is a parasite. But if it's truly AI, in that it has a quantum or geometric leap from any kind of pure calculation into having something that I would argue has the characteristics of life, which means that it is a person, then you have to judge it on its actions. And both Edie and Legion act like people, which to me, I think, puts them in that sci-fi exploring humanity rather than this is how I would respond to Grok or ChatGPT or any of the LLMs that we're currently dealing with. I just think it's a different category of character, and so I don't. Maybe it also reflects the fact that I read a ton of like I, Robot and other Asimov short stories, and he was really pro robot in those books, and I kind of still have a nostalgia for friendly robot characters from that period of my life.
And I think it is okay, and for the sake of science fiction or fantasy for that matter, it's okay to engage with fiction on its own terms, even if we don't say that we think that that kind of AI is possible, that we're discussing, okay, is this a sapient sentient creature, is this a moral rational creature, even if we don't think that's the case in the real world, it's perfectly okay to play with those ideas and accept them within fiction, within the terms of that world. And in that case, yeah, I think Legion is interesting. I don't he's not like one of my all-time favorite robots or anything, but in the case of Legion, what makes him interesting is he is still very alien. He starts talking about how there's uh, uh how many basically how many copies of the Geth software are running on this one platform, right? That is that is not C3PO right there. That is something that is far more alien in nature. But within the Mass Effect universe, it is interesting to see how Legion's continual exposure to uh, humans and other human-like aliens makes him more human over the course of it, and he begins to adopt more human mannerisms and things like that. Yeah, that's always a fun part of sci-fi. That's like, I mean, if we want to, we drag some C.S. Lewis into it, it's like talking about how pets, how if pets, is that in Mere Christianity, the part about pets um,
I
becoming
think
more
that's
human
Four
like.
Loves.
Is it Four Loves?
I
It's been
think
a
so.
while. It's been a while since I've read either of those. But basically, become more the animals that have more exposure to humans become more human like in their behavior and emotions, and the way that they uh, the way that they approach any sort of moral type situation.
But
So
of course, the key difference there is for Lewis, there's never that leap from the animal to the human. As
right.
much as they may grow, I mean, even, I mean, yeah, I guess that's what I'd say about that. And I agree with you that we can accept the rules of a fictional world. I mean, you're reading fantasy, we can accept the right use of magic in certain contexts within this world in a way that we wouldn't necessarily approve of or seek out in the primary world. But I think that it becomes more difficult to parse that out when we're dealing with sci-fi that's dealing with things that are at least running parallel to our current real world conversations. I think that's when it becomes difficult, where philosophy and fantasy or fiction gets kind of blurred a little bit. I can't help but to see the progression of, and I know we're focusing on two right now, but Edie in two to three,
Hmm.
and the relationship that it forms with Joker. Like, I can't help but to think about like this new Grok companions that
Mm.
Elon Musk is throwing out there. These semi-pornographic things that, like, obviously we see where this is headed, this trajectory that we're headed in. We see what plays out in Mass Effect 2 with Edie. I mean, that like I can't help but to make these real world connections and see like how dangerous this is, especially coming from a story that's obviously being very approving of this. We'll talk about this more when we get to the third game. But even still, like the Paragon thing to do is to totally affirm this relationship that Joker has with this AI, and like obviously there is a philosophy here at playing this game that I think is at best dangerous in I mean, really, it's just materialistic at its root. It's nominalistic. There really are no universal standards. It's just kind of whatever is whatever, which I think is, I mean, maybe Michael can push me back on this, but I think part and parcel of true like, sci-fi, where it's driven by science itself, which is materialistic in nature, right? That's what science is, which I don't think science is bad, but when science becomes the basis for the framework of, I think that's where things become dangerous. Um, And I think that's where we get the warning that sci-fi has to offer us.
Right, exactly. And when I say to accept it within the premise of the world, I don't necessarily mean that you walk out of it having changed anything about you, the way you view the primary world. But it still has, there's some value to engage with fiction as it presents itself, and then you can judge it afterwards. But if you approach it and say, well, that's not the way it is in the real world, then you're refusing to engage with the work as it stands, and you might be missing something that it has to say, good or bad, in this case, which I think most of us are going to rather disagree with some of the Edie type stuff and stuff like that, right? That's totally fine. I think you should. Uh, and I would hope that a lot of people, maybe not everybody, but I hope that a lot of people are playing question some of those things, and that is a utility, as Andrew was talking about on Twitter today. This one of these chief functions of science fiction is to warn, and that's absolutely the case. Um, there's a number of reasons how science fiction kind of ended up in that hole. Uh, One of them, I think, is in some ways that the luminaries that shaped the genre in the past were materialistic, very worldly men, whereas fantasy was inoculated by numerous deeply religious men and deeply philosophical, deeply thinking men like that. So fantasy took this inoculation that protected it from some very bad ideas for a long time. It's obviously that inoculation is wearing off tremendously right now. Fantasy's in dire straits too. But so that's one reason that science fiction took this negative world path. But just the very nature of, since most sci-fi looks forward, right? You're going to imagine a world in the future. It's a story, so you need something to go wrong. You need some sort of conflict. So you usually almost always are imagining the world going wrong in the future, right? So by its very nature, even when written by a Christian, science fiction is usually cautionary, right? Because it is, the future is wrong. Here's why you don't want to. Here's why you don't want to end up down this path.
Yeah, I think that one of the best ways of framing sci-fi versus fantasy in nature is, I mean, C.S. Lewis's his Ransom series. I mean, or even just That Hideous Strength. You've got sci-fi at Bellbury. You've got fantasy at St. Anne's.
Oh yeah,
right. I like that science. I understood principally as the manipulate or the mastering of nature. Right, that left to its own devices is going to go wrong. You need that metaphysical structure to guide the direction of science, and that's why I would argue that sci-fi inevitably moves into, at its best at least, moves into a cautionary direction, because even if you have somebody who's tries to create a very inspiring, hopeful sci-fi tale, I would argue that there's something wrong with that person. That inevitably what they're presenting is going to be something macrobial, to something dangerous, because science can't provide telos. And so if science is framing the story, like there's nowhere good it can go because science can't account for goodness, right? It's a tool. And so that's why I mean, I'm echoing much of what you said there, but I think that, yeah, sci-fi by itself, it tends toward the dystopian because it has to, because it can't account for the good. But I'll stop talking now.
And that's funny too that you say it, at its best. And what's funny is that even at its worst, it usually still provides that very same service as cautionary tale. It's like, there's an entire subgenre, genres of sci-fi. It's like you think about cyberpunk, right? Cyberpunk, it doesn't exist for any reason but to basically say that transhumanism is a nightmare, and corporatism is awful, and there's nothing about, there's nothing, what am I trying to say, there's nothing
Uplifting.
Yeah, well, no, uplifting, because you could, I mean, I guess you could, in theory, you can tell some story of rejection of these things within it, but it's always this nightmarish thing. So I mean, you say even at its best. I say even at its worst, it's usually still presenting that same framework. But it's interesting you say metaphysical or materialist and metaphysical. Um, one of the ways that I've always liked to differentiate between the two is that science fiction is usually uh, man's conflict in relationship with nature, and by nature I mean reality, versus whereas fantasy is usually man's conflict in relationship with supernature. Which is very, very, very similar to that dichotomy that you were saying of materialist and metaphysical.
Right. Or as Tolkien says, that in when we enter into fairy, it's actually fairy that's hypernatural that reveals our supernatural nature. And
Right.
so it's actually a way of demonstrating, of revealing our agency and the significance of the decisions that we make because we are ontologically separate from the world that's around us. Um, and that's why he calls it the perilous realm, because this is where you could lose or find yourself.
That remind and that also this also reminds me a little bit of, I think it's something that Orson Scott Card says, um, who is mostly sci-fi writer. He's written some fantasy, but he's Mormon, so he is religious. I think he says that you can have as much talk about religion and sci-fi as you want, but the second that you confirm that there is any form of deity, you've stepped into fantasy. You can talk about, you can have aliens with all sorts of gods and things like that, but the second you confirm that any of those things are true and they step into the story, you've crossed over into the realm of fantasy, which again falls into the same framework we've been talking about.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense because they're not materialistic, and science deals with matter.
Which and so from the Christian perspective of dealing with sci-fi, how do you deal with those things? Is you can still write stories of people and faith and things like that, but you cannot have, it's more walking. It would have to be stories of walking in faith without sight. And the second that you confirm that sight, then you've crossed the line back over into fantasy again.
In Revelation, the one thing that's called out is those who have ears, let them hear. And we're also called those with eyes to see, let them see. But at the end times, at where everything is when Christ returns, people are only called to say, if you have ears to hear, let them hear. So that's insightful.
So I'm wondering, where do you see these worldview questions really popping out in Mass Effect 2 itself, or do you?
I wonder, actually, I think to redeem Mass Effect 2's status as the least philosophically deep game, I think maybe a little more implicitly, but the game seems very, I think it's interested at least somewhat in the question of what the human soul is or whether or not there is a soul. You start the game by getting resurrected, and do I think the game adequately deals with what that means? Not really, but the question is there, and you also, with Legion later on, start to have questions inviting, is he human? What does it mean to be human? We've already talked about this a little bit more, but I think more than you might anticipate or might see on first pass of Mass Effect 2, I do think the game is invested a little bit in what it means to be human, what it means to be sentient, because you have this human first organization. Why is that a priority versus other aliens? What does it mean to be a conscious being? Is your body tied in with your soul? We talked about that with Thane. So I do think actually the question of the soul, what it means, whether we have it and who has it, is actually something that comes up repeatedly in Mass Effect 2.
Yeah, I would just argue that in the way that it's answered, it comes out pretty definitively in materialistic terms, I would say. I mean, even the resurrection of Shepard, it seems like I mean, they just rebuilt him. Like it's,
Yeah, it's a hand wave, admittedly. Yeah, but still,
But
yeah, I
but
don't
yet at
know.
the same time, the game, there's always this, one of those nightmare questions on sci-fi is when you go through the Star Trek teleporter, are you still you on the other side, or have you died and are you just a reassembled at molecular level copy of you? Right. That's always one of the nightmare there's your light again, Andrew.
Yeah, this I don't know. There's something weird with this light. I don't know what's
That's
going on.
that's always one of the questions of sci-fi, because what is the Star Trek transporter sending your soul to? Star Trek doesn't tend to actually ask that question, although it does usually have all sorts of weird nightmare fuel with the teleporter. They know it's a weird technology and has all sorts of horrifying implications. But with the case of Mass Effect, you have Shepard is very, very dead. They have Shepard rebuilt, and it never does question, is this a different Shepard? Right? There's never the game that's beyond the scope of the game. The assumption is that this is Shepard, which implies in some level, I would say, the existence of a soul because it's still Shepard. There's not a, well, we made a clone of Shepard, right? That's not what the game is saying. And so while I agree that there's the level of thought that it's put into it is certainly more than somehow Palpatine has returned, it still seems to imply that there is something more than just a clone of Shepard.
And you know what's striking me that I think is really intriguing? I don't know what to make of it quite yet because I haven't thought about it a lot. But if you're a renegade, unless you get this little perk, in which case your whole scars are reconstructed, if you're a renegade, your body starts to break down visibly, especially in the face. What do we make of that? What is it about being, I know renegade isn't quite evil, but it's the aggressive, domineering kind of personality that says, no, you're starting to break down. You're no longer integral and whole because of what you're doing. There is some aspect of morality that's interested and tied into the body and the spirit simultaneously that says, okay, you act this way, you perform this way, your body's going to respond. I don't think it's entirely materialistic, is what I'm saying, by pointing out the whole facial scarring renegade issue.
I do think that's an interesting angle that they take, and I'm sure it's partly just, hey,
Cool.
we got to find out a way to make the character look different if they go dark, like in KOTOR. But yeah, because eventually your eyes are glowing red, and yeah, it's a pretty interesting look. But
I
Now,
think the
sorry, go ahead,
writers
Ian.
of Mass Effect are they're definitely building on the foundation of Asimov and Heinlein, who pretty much rejected any kind of religion pretty consciously, but they also clearly seem to be aware of contributions from people like Paul Anderson and maybe even C.S. Lewis. There's some kind of Lewisian touches to some of the characters and dialogues you have, because a lot of the aliens have religion, and there's not a mocking of those religions outside of maybe the Hanar. So I think that there's a sense in Mass Effect that everyone is searching for meaning beyond, and it's not just like a Cthulhu, oh, all religion is actually tied back to the Reapers, so it's all an evil trick. Like, I think that there is more of a good faith effort by the writers to allow room for belief, but I also think it's clear that none of the writers were believers themselves, at least not in a way that impacts the writing I can see.
Well, they can't escape it. I mean, they do end up with the cyclical fashion, which would come from reincarnation, whereas everything's going to continue again, but that's also a sci-fi trope in other things. But no, I think that from our last talk, it just hit me more so that this is an apocalyptic tale. This is the end of all things, and Shepard's just warning everyone they're coming, they're coming. This is the final push for the Great Commission, if you will. But
yes, especially in the third game,
yeah,
it's very apocalyptic.
right. So this is the second game really just kind of brings about like just putting the pieces together. And Ian, I'm going to try to get you over to the collector side as an interesting villain. Because in Revelation 9:6, and in those days people will seek death and will never find it. So the collectors are the Prothean. They were collected, they were kept alive for 50,000 years or so, and they will never actually find death of themselves because they are under the influence and the overall control of the wickedness of the Reapers themselves. Reapers, which are technically celestial in a way. They're fallen angels. They live out beyond light, beyond everything else, and they've just seek to consume. They've consumed the Prothean. They've consumed the humans. That's what we see in the final thing when they're trying to rebuild themselves in man's image. They're actually bringing about that whole thing. So they're trying to take back what is part of creation. The writers can't escape what is creation, even though they try to push it further and further away. They will always have to go back to, the true myth.
At the
I
same
will
time,
say I'm
go
looking
ahead.
forward to playing the DLC where you get an actual Prothean on your team in Mass Effect 3, because I think that's going to maybe retroactively make me care more about these boring crab people.
Yeah, hey, get him early and take him out with Liara as much as you can because it's pretty hilarious a lot of the time.
But Liara is like also my least favorite.
Yeah, I know, except she keeps saying what she believes she's an expert in, and him actually being of the race that she claims to be an expert in, he's constantly correcting her, and it's pretty great.
It's pretty
That
funny.
sounds actually really hilarious.
Okay,
I'll take that under advisement.
I will generally come to Ian's defense that the collectors in general are a less interesting villain than the Reapers. It's it's the step down from cosmic horror to the middle manager that's been hired by the cosmic horror, right? So, but again, the narrative just isn't really focused on them hardly at all. You're right. They step in for those brief moments. It really is more about the characters. And I'll even say this. Sovereign is not Sovereign. Harbinger is significantly less cool than Sovereign. Like in every way, the Sovereign's aloofness, the much more terrifying like digital processing of Sovereign's voice. Harbinger is just not as cool. So I will definitely agree that Mass Effect 2 is a step down in the villain department compared to 1 and 3. So I am going to fully stand with Ian there. I don't hate him or anything, but that's just not where the focus of the game is on. That's not the star at all.
True,
Yeah,
but they are corruption of what was,
Yeah,
and it
yeah,
proves
yeah. No,
towards
I
what they're
Mhm.
trying to actually create. Sure, as villains, I mean, they have wings. Protheans don't have wings.
yeah. I mean, let's be honest, they're bug zombies. That's all they are. I mean, I don't know. They don't do it for me either.
They're discount crab people. This is what I keep saying.
No, it is that it's revealed that the Reapers aren't giant squid monsters, that is a race from a previous cycle that was like the best that they'd encountered, and so they took that form. I'm remembering that right, aren't I? Yeah, and so
yes,
that's why,
basically.
because humanity thwarted their attempt in the first game, they've taken an interest in humanity and began to try to make a human Reaper. I think it's a clever bit of sci-fi writing,
And
and to
just
have
like
that
human superiority.
right, right.
But
What a
finally, the
twist.
Reapers get it.
Except it's super easy to kill that thing.
Yeah, yeah.
But I mean, it is cinematically interesting when you're fighting this thing when it emerges or when it wakes up, right? When you're like, you're not really sure what's going to happen. I mean, obviously, playing the game, you know it's going to wake up, but it is a good cinematic movement. Even though I definitely agree across the board that the villains are just not as interesting this time around. I mean, that none of the collectors have any agency, so you're not dealing with real characters. They're just blank fodder. And then, Harbinger himself, not that interesting. Overall, again, I enjoy this game. I think to me, it's perhaps the most fun, but it also feels the laziest to me.
Yeah, I think as a puzzle, like putting it together in your head, it's really satisfying to get your crew, to get them loyal, and then hit this mission. But like, what does it mean? It doesn't change anything in the overall arc.
Right. But it is a great build of the tension when you actually go through that that relay, not knowing what's going to be on the other side, all of the sequence of events from then on is just really gripping and interesting. And I think they did a great job with it.
They were all different writers as well. They went through production, like big production challenges for this one. The head writer moved. One guy, I guess, broke a hand or something in a skating accident and could only type with one. So, like, there was a lot of different minds going through, especially at the last final mission. That was a completely different team that they had to pull in from, I believe, Dragon Age.
Yeah, I would like to quickly say that I want to revise my statement. It's not the laziest, but I would say it's the most inconsequential, and that's what knocks it down for me. That's a better way of framing what I'm trying to say.
Well, it's a hard spot to be in because you're not introducing the stakes with the initial takeover that you have as, the potential ending of Mass Effect 1, and you're not having the absolute apocalyptic world-ending scenario of Mass Effect 3, so what do you do in the middle? And I think it did a great job. Like, I think as much as you can do with that kind of awkward pacing, where is its place in the overall trilogy, a prep game, like we're preparing for game 3, I think navigating that many different interesting characters with their own arcs and having good performances, good dialogue, improving on combat, I think Mass Effect 2's place could have been very forgettable otherwise, but I do think the characters and I think the story, the action-packed, fast-paced nature of the story really saved it. Because you could have a game like Dragon Age 2 that was very inconsequential and was a major flop, and this was no Dragon Age 2. This was a great game that a lot of people, myself included, really enjoyed, but I think the story and the characters' stories individually really save it from what could have been a very mediocre place in the trilogy.
Well, narratively, Mass Effect 2, you're right. In a lot of ways, it is a repeat of Mass Effect 1 on some level. So think about it like this. The Reapers are hyped as the villain we cannot defeat. That is one thing that I think, and we'll talk about this with the ending of Mass Effect 3, I'm sure. But one thing that Mass Effect 1 and 2 are abundantly clear with is that there is no conventional victory possible over the Reapers, right? There is no way that the galaxy wins a war against the Reapers. It's a losing battle no matter what. So Mass Effect 1 is a desperate Hail Mary to stop the Reapers' primary method of return, right? Mass Effect 2 is basically plan B. Plan A has gone south. So now we're going to go with plan B. We're going to manufacture a new Reaper, right? It's still just both games 1 and 2 are kicking the can down the road of we can't beat these guys, but we can at least stall them. And even so much as, and we haven't talked about it, has everybody played the Arrival DLC for Mass Effect 2?
Yes.
Okay, so
that's the one where they throw the asteroid into the Mass Effect relay.
Yeah, so basically, that it's a kind of prologue to Mass Effect 3 almost is what the Arrival DLC of Mass Effect 2 is. Does it take place after the end? I don't remember.
It technically came out afterwards.
Yeah, it came out like a full year after the game was released.
But you can do it at any point.
You can do it earlier, okay. And you get to kill a lot of Batarians. But
which it introduces, by the way. Like, we haven't seen Batarians before that DLC.
Well, I said, but isn't it the Batarians?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'd seen a few. We'd seen them. Anyway.
Do we see them in this game?
In this one, they're mostly mercs.
A bunch of the mercs are Batarians.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. But we don't see the first game.
We do see them in a DLC.
Arrival is almost a plan C. It's the plan C. Okay, here's the next method, but it only kicks the can down a couple of months. And the insinuation at the end of Arrival is they're coming. This was the last stall. It doesn't matter what you do, they'll be here soon. So that's where Mass Effect 2 is it's just that continuing that kicking the can down the road to the point of realizing there's nowhere else to go. We cannot delay this any further. They're here. Which is Mass Effect 3 is they're here. That's my defense of its place in the trilogy.
Yeah. And then the Batarians did show up and bring down the Sky DLC, another asteroid going to the
Okay, so
planet.
that's what I was confusing it with.
Okay,
Thank
that's
you.
what you were thinking about.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. Two asteroids, both involving Batarians.
Look, it just so happens that throwing a whole lot of mass at things works really well in physics, so it's a great solution to many problems. If you've got a spacefaring civilization, just throw a rock at it.
Especially in a game called Mass Effect, right? Isn't that the whole point? Yeah, I mean, having only played the Legendary, I have no idea what's DLC and what's not. But
Overlord was the DLC, Arrival, and the Shadow Broker. Or
Got
yeah.
it.
And I do, Michael, I appreciate you sometimes bringing us back around to how these characters play important story aspects, like, and that's one of the things I like about Legion is he gives, or it gives a voice to what were just, malevolent cannon fodder in the first game. We can actually talk to them and learn something a little bit about them, which I find interesting.
David, Legion uses they them pronouns. I
Okay.
want to read the point of personal privilege.
Yeah, and I will grant them that pronoun because it makes perfect sense. But
It's really funny. I was thinking about when we were talking about religion and how basically Mass Effect doesn't ever kick religion, any of its religious characters for being religious. I was thinking about that this was a game that appeared at the last possible moment than it could have before so many more things would have gone wrong with it. And the pronoun thing is what made me think that.
Well, and you can see it coming in 3.
You can
see it coming.
But what I mean, so many more things. What's the date on 3? 2012.
Yeah.
Once you hit 15 in Obergefell, it's the gloves are off on everything, entertainment wise.
Right.
So,
and to Andrew's point about how it's the Paragon thing to just be, hey, AI love is love, and we just, you've got to affirm it. It keeps going more and more, and we can blame BioWare, but also the fans have been ridiculous in that capacity.
Oh, yeah.
I remember in Mass Effect Andromeda, they introduce a male character on your team, and there was a public outcry that you could not be in a gay relationship with this new alien. Like they were mad that he was straight, so they had to patch it so that you could have a gay relationship with this character. It's just absurd.
yeah,
But
it's hard to navigate these conversations to see where the pressure is coming from. Are we dealing with numbers or simply volume? I think that's difficult to navigate.
Yep.
I mean, I've been playing the remastered Oblivion. I had to go type A body or something.
Yeah, I think it's really some very, very savvy activist groups that figured out a way to get access. I mean, they had a godsend in a couple of major figures who immediately formed relationships with game devs, which meant that there was a lot of creation of games that did not have an audience.
yeah, like the most recent, I haven't played it. Megan, I think you said you played it. The most recent Dragon Age.
God, yeah, I played it. And I pre-ordered it, so I bought it full price, and I think it goes for like 99 cents now or something.
Part of the problem.
I am part of the problem. No, I listen. I loved that trilogy. I know it's a different conversation, but yeah, I think what's striking and why I keep harping on the characters being so excellent in this game and how you can just dislike people, that is very much an impossible feature in Veilguard. This is when did Mass Effect 2 come out? 2012? No, 9? 10? 10? We're now 14, actually it came out last year, 14 years removed from Mass Effect 2. And Veilguard wants to make similar moves. I don't know if we've played it, I don't want to spoil anything, but the end sequence is similar to the end sequence of Mass Effect 2 in that you have to be very strategic in your companions, where you're sending them off to. I'll put it like that. You also have a big cast of people, and you're invested in their personal problems, let's say. So if you zoom out, there's a lot of similarities between Mass Effect 2 and Dragon Age Veilguard. How it's executed between the two games, however, very different. You have actual personalities and people. We have different religions and philosophies that are not always palatable, and that is okay. You can keep them as companions, but you can actively just dislike people, and it's not seen as a bug in your experience. Versus Veilguard, I think your achievement when you get all of your companions is something like found family. Like you have a found family amidst the chaos. I'm like, I don't know these people, and I don't like. They're not even my found friends. Like they're not my found family. But it's sad to see where BioWare has gone, because BioWare has always prided itself on excellent character relationships and dynamics and squad members, all that. And I think you need to have characters that you can dislike or even hate in order for that to work. I think there's this developing idea now that you should enjoy all the characters because you just love them so much and they're all just quirky and fun and interesting. But I think you have to hate some of them in order to love the others that you actually get to enjoy and remember. Yeah, so I think that's my retroactive look at Mass Effect 2. Why I cherish it even more is because it's executed storytelling on a character development level that I'm not sure that BioWare is going to be able to do again, at least not with their current team.
You talk about not with their current team, and we talk about it happening, these games being made in the kind of the last window where they could have. And Ian talked about activists, and sometimes you hear talked about the Tumblrification of entertainment, right? And we those people that aren't really part of that Tumblr sphere use that very negatively, but it's a very real thing that happened starting around 2015. Western animation companies, you start talking about your Steven Universes and those places, they hired people from Tumblr. Massive amounts of talent was hired out of Tumblr. It also happened in the video game industry. And I've had someone confirm to me recently, it also happened in Hollywood, that they hired that Hollywood was mining Tumblr for talent in this period. And so what did you have in Tumblr? You had these very hyper focused fandoms, very hyper focused on LGBT stuff, very focused on shipping culture and things like that. So you wonder what happened to BioWare. Well, that's very a real part of it, is where the talent pool came. One of the big indications over the last decade that that BioWare was really been a shadow of its former self is how many little indie studios were always hyping former BioWare devs. Right, there were so many little indie games. We're talking, these three former BioWare devs, these three. How does everybody have former BioWare devs? Who's left at BioWare? And what's turned out is basically nobody. Nobody's
The
left that
answer
was
is Trick
there,
Squeaks.
unfortunately, which is how Veilguard happened. Is the talent, and that's the same thing with Hollywood. Why is Hollywood what it is? Is the talent's gotten replaced with I don't want to say Tumblr entirely, because it's obviously not just that, but it's not that either. That's a real Tumblrification is a real thing that has happened, and it shows. It really shows in some of these industries.
Yeah, that's definitely one thing that I've really enjoyed about playing these Mass Effect games, not having played them before, so that they're fresh to me, is it feels like a game that was made 15 years ago. like like you can see certain things, certain paths starting to be laid out, but we're definitely not there yet. Like it feels like a different time. Whereas we'll talk Dragon Age in its own right another time, for sure. I love Dragon Age, the first three games. I have not touched the fourth. I refuse to pay full price. I'll get it on the next Steam sale just so I can complete it and talk about. But I feel embarrassed having seen trailers for that game. Like everything that comes out, it's so just awful writing. And not having played it personally, I can see what Megan's talking about. How we have just this philosophy of superficial tolerance that actually forbids real relationships because everything just gets glossed over. You're not allowed to actually see people. You're only allowed to see an object to affirm. It's not, you're not actually engaging with a real person. And so games have become so much less grounded in just reality that you can't have effective storytelling. You can't have effective relationships. It just feels like you're being fed propaganda, which obviously is what a certain corner of the market has a taste for, in large part because they don't necessarily know that there is anything else. Um, I've talked about this before in another context, but when I teach my state university philosophy students, that nearly all of them come into my class thinking everything is just artificial, everything's subjective, nothing is actually real. Everything is whatever you view it as. And so let's just have these rosy glasses on, and that's what the world is. And yeah, as soon as I start giving them hints that maybe there's such a thing as reality and that you can actually move places, and some of those places might be better than where you currently are, it's like they've never even heard that before because their entire life they've been fed this propaganda of just everything is nothing and it's all subjective, it's not real. But once they start to get a hint of that, it's actually refreshing and they recognize this is exactly what they've wanted, to know they can actually aspire to something. And so it's so disappointing, not just from an entertainment angle, but it's it's saddening for the condition of the modern human soul that we're so out of touch with reality that we don't even know when we're being fed this superficial propaganda, despite the fact that we all hunger for something more. And so I look forward to getting more into that when we get to Dragon Age, but I guess we can pull back to Mass Effect if anyone has anything else to say about this game.
Well, I mean, we didn't really talk about Grunt at all. I do think his character is interesting, brings up questions about what makes you who you are. He's bred in a tank. He hasn't been through the things that a normal Krogan has been through, so they reject him, and he frankly rejects himself. He doesn't feel, he has these urges, but he doesn't have the experience. And I just think, as you do his loyalty mission, you get the opportunity to help him gain some of his own pride of his race and all that. But I found that fascinating. And another thing that this game made me think of, back on Thane and his memory, is how the older I get, the more I realize that the fading nature of our memories is really a gift from God. Because without, if we could remember everything perfectly the way Thane does, you'd never be able to get over grief or any kind of difficult aspects in your life that, the passage of time, you have to be able to find a new normal in order to get past those sorts of things. So, uh, yeah, I don't really have more to say than that, but it kind of drives that point home that, yeah, sometimes I wish I could remember things more clearly, but then I realize often it's a blessing that we can't.
It'd just be nice to articulate everything the way Thane does in his memories.
Right.
The other person we didn't talk about much was actually Tally. And I was actually thinking about her somewhat because of what Megan was saying, with that you don't have to like everybody in Mass Effect 2. And a bunch of these crewmates are not close to each other or Shepard at all. This is not a found family game, right? And I hate that we all roll our eyes at the term found family now, because found family should be a redemptive thing for people that have broken families, that they can still find hope and love and a place in this world, right? This should be a Christian trope, but it has been completely flipped onto this place. You can reject your earthly family and find something else. So I hate that, but that actually is what Tally's trope is, but in a way that lands very well, because she, we get to spend all this time at the Quarian Fleet, which is kind of this one of the more interesting, social settings of the Mass Effect universe. And ultimately she has to leave it, and her name changes to, because their last name is of the ship, basically. So she was Tali Zora Vas Nima, and because she's basically kicked off of her ship, she becomes Tali Zora Vas Normandy, because the Normandy is now her ship. So there is this found family aspect to Tally's story, where Shepard is part of her family, his ship is her ship, and it's nice. It's really, I know why Tally is just such a favorite, because she is just such a sweet character. She's just so likable, and she goes through a lot, and she finds a new home. So they used to be able to write good found family is where I was going with that, Megan. What I was thinking about.
I agree with Tali's story, although I'm noticing now, thinking back, there's a lot of absentee fathers in Mass Effect 2, or daddy issues between
Or
you
evil
have
fathers.
or evil. You have Miranda, you have Tali, you have I don't know if you'd count Grunt's kind of creator, might
I
count
would
him.
count that.
You
Jacob,
go without that.
you have yeah. This is I don't know what that's about.
Jack is familyless.
Yeah,
Uh, Samara is the mother.
the mother and the father in some way. Yeah, I
Well,
guess.
right, but you know what I mean. You know what I mean. That she's the parent in this case with kids with
Right.
issues.
Mhm.
Yeah, parents and children.
Thane is also a parent one.
Yeah, he's the bad father. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
That's true.
Hmm. I'll do
But
something here.
look, there's the thing though, is that the lack of parent is so common in fiction for so many reasons. I mean, it's obviously not a universal experience, but everybody hits a point of discovering that their parents are human. And so, troubled relationships with parents is it's not necessarily a universal experience, but it's something that everybody can at least identify with in the over a course of a story. But also for purely practical reasons, it's always a great source of drama. And if you happen to have younger characters, I'm sorry, but no good parent lets their 12-year-olds go on an adventure. So there's a reason why the parents are dead.
Right. It's a good psychological mechanism, narrative mechanism to show, okay, like
Yes.
you are now individuating and going off and
Yes.
discovering your call and your adventure and who you are as an individuated adult. So it's useful. It's just there's a lot.
There is
It's
a lot in this
of
one.
it's a lot of dads
There
to
is.
be doing, yeah, or being absentee. Interesting. Hmm.
I
You may
did
have
kind of
just
want to.
criticized every Pokemon game where every 10-year-old goes out.
I did kind of want to comment on. We've talked a lot about AI, but there's another technology that's really prevalent in this game that I feel like should have been leaned on a bit harder, and that's genetic engineering. Both Miranda and Rex, their whole
Grant.
stories revolve around being genetically engineered and the ethics of that. And I think there should have been more questioning of whether those. I mean, there's a little bit in Grunt's story, but no one ever questions if Miranda should be human. Whereas I feel like more people probably should, and I wish there had been some kind of interaction between Grunt and Miranda because they have the same basic backstory of evil dad slash Krogan warlord creates perfect human slash Krogan.
Yeah, and Shepard too is also a bit of a reconstruction. I don't know if we would count him or her in
I'm
that
sure there was
category.
genetic engineering in that.
Yeah, so but yeah, you're right. The game isn't as suspicious as like I might want it to be of okay, so how much genetic engineering do you get before you are no longer a Krogan or a human? Or maybe the game is, I don't know, not really suspicious of like racial essentialism, but like what does it mean to be the most perfect of X thing? And we find that with Grunt and with Miranda, it's getting away from the father figure that wants the racial essentialism or wants the superhuman, the Ubermensch kind of figure to go do your masculinity proving grounds quest or go be with your sister and have
Be more of a normal person.
yeah, be more a normal person, exactly. Yeah, so I don't know if that reads to me as like suspicion of the technology.
I would say inherently it feels like there's at least some level of suspicion, even if a full exploration of it does end up being outside the scope of the game as presented. But I would say there's at least a healthy level
it's
of
implicit, sure.
right. You don't ever get a feel good story about the father engineering the perfect daughter. That's not what's being presented.
Hmm.
I just think that with a lot of genetic engineering in the news these days, in a similar way to me as large LLMs and AI assistants, I feel like Christians should be thinking about that as well in terms of the warnings that sci-fi can provide us.
Just
Right.
say no to transhumanism. Just say no.
I mean, I'm going to get the internet in my brain when I can, because that means I can read while I'm walking. But
Well, I think IVF is also a very relevant technology that a lot of
Ooh.
people are actively suspicious of and should be not enough. But we see that with the genophage as well. And that's a place where we're really suspicious of what does it mean to manipulate the whole genetic outcome of a species, not just of an individual. So maybe because it's a species, that's why we're like, oh, and that's bad, that's genocide, we don't like it, that's why we're more overtly suspicious of it. But yeah, now that I'm thinking of it, I think the game does critique genetic modification implicitly in some areas, but definitely more forcefully with the genophage, which overall, I don't think you can play the game and you're allowed to have an opinion about the genophage that's not, it's bad. You know, you can kind of help implement it as a pragmatic thing or help sustain it as a pragmatic decision in the third game. But I don't think the game ever is ambivalent about the morality of the genophage, which is a good thing. You know, that we're saying, hey, it's not good to wipe out civilizations. It's not good to stop people from giving birth. Declining birth rates are bad. You know, that's again, could we have a game that says that today? I don't know, but we had it then, and I think that's good. Yeah, there is a lot of suspicion there with genetic modification birth rates, and I think that speaks to IVF concerns today.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that the developers would be willing to directly engage with that, obviously, but on a principled level, that Grunt, Miranda, I mean, obviously we're Shepard. I mean, anyone who kind of falls into this category of being constructed in some way, shape, or form, like we're meant to affirm their personhood while at the same time potentially questioning how it came about. I think that
Mhm.
there's plenty of room for doing that. And I think there's plenty of room for doing that with IVF, that, somebody born to IVF, like they're a real person, but at the same time, we can question the practice.
Right. Yeah, and I don't think it's an accident that it is not good guys who bring Shepard back to life, so that we it's not really celebrated. It's just Shepard finds himself back alive, and that's what he's got to deal with. So, and I do feel like the sequence shows like dead veins having life brought back to them. So he's not really quite the ship of Theseus that somebody on Star Trek who's been transported is. But yeah, it's still an ethical question of resurrection. Most fiction, I've always found it fascinating how much fiction avoids resurrection. Like it's just almost an understood that when you're dead, you're gone, and I don't think it's a respect for Christ's resurrection story, but I do think it's interesting how much people shy away from it, and reasonably so.
Except for genres that are should be more shy of it, like comic books.
True.
Right. Uh, my advice to people writing stories is that if you feel you have to bring a character back from the dead, it should be only once in the entire setting, and it has to mean something. You cannot do it again because, I mean, it has resurrection must mean something. If you make resurrection mean nothing, you are not writing a true story. That's just all there is to it.
It works in Dragon Ball Z because they have a whole afterlife that's built into the story, and it becomes an interesting plot element. But it does trivialize death
Right,
throughout the
but I was about to
entire
say,
series.
in that case, when you systematize it, is it even resurrection?
Right.
Right.
Like in some cases, someone just suddenly has a halo and that's it.
Well, we've been going for an hour and a half or so. I think that I mean, pretty much, I think anything that we have to discuss will be directly relevant, if not more so, for Mass Effect 3 at this point. And so I think we'll go ahead and wrap it for now. Appreciate everyone here, and I'm sure that I will see you all again next time as we wrap it up. And I think we'll have a lot of interesting things to talk about for Mass Effect 3. In fact, I'm very impressed with what we came out with for Mass Effect 2. So I don't know, maybe I need to review my initial opening statement here. All right. Well, thanks again, and I will see you all next time. All right. Thank you for listening. And I should mention that if you notice a drop in the sound quality of my outro here, it's because The cord on my good microphone just broke, and so I'll need to replace that soon. But anyways, thank you for listening to our conversation on Mass Effect 2. Stick around here. Make sure you're subscribed so you catch Mass Effect 3 in a couple of weeks from now, going back to an every other week basis. Although you will get a new episode over on the Mythic Mind Movies and Shows podcast next week with the as we continue our Star Wars series. Although the next thing that you'll get out from us is over on the main Mythic Mind podcast on Monday. You will be getting the next conversation on Augustine's Confessions from our book club. And so make sure you subscribe to all three Mythic Mind podcasts: Mythic Mind Games, and Mythic Mind Movies and Shows. Or if you want to get all of that into one feed early and ad-free, then head over to patreon.com/mythicmind. Sign on at any level. Also, as a reminder, starting at the beginning of August, we have our course on Plato, Stoicism, and Till We Have Faces. And if you want to enroll in that, you have a couple options. For one, you can either just purchase the course outright. You can become a Tier 3 patron, whether monthly or annually. We'll give you access to that. Yeah, and so there's that. All right, so you'll hear from us next on Monday over on Mythic Mind. And until then, Godspeed.